Hi, my name is Ken Davidian, and welcome to Season 2 of Organization Theory in Space, or OT in Space. In this series, I'm making I'm making a video for each chapter of the Oxford Handbook of Organizational Change and Innovation, second edition, edited by Marshall Scott Poole and Andy Van de Ven. This video covers Chapter 24 of the Handbook, entitled Processes of Emergence and Change in Industry and Ecosystem Infrastructure. In this chapter, we talk about different layers of infrastructure. We'll identify the current infrastructure models, and then we'll zero in on one of the models and talk about 4 different categories of industry infrastructure elements. All this leads up to 5 propositions that comprise a proposed process model of infrastructure emergence and change. Finally, we'll conclude the presentation with a brief discussion of further research in this area. The layers of infrastructure correspond to the levels of analysis that we talked about in the first season of OT in Space, ranging from the smallest level, which is the organization in this context, up to the industry or population level, then up next to the ecosystem or community level, and then up to the field, and then the infrastructure level. As you can tell, the infrastructure level is the largest or highest level of analysis, supporting all the levels of analysis below it. The chapter is concerned with the influence of infrastructure on the ecosystem or community level of analysis, and the literature identifies 4 different types of ecosystems. The innovation ecosystem, built around some technology or other value proposition, such as Silicon Valley. The business ecosystem, built around the firm and its environment, like the ecosystem of Apple products and peripherals. The entrepreneurial ecosystem, which focuses on the support of startup firms like national or regional incubators. And finally, the platform ecosystem, built upon market interaction facilitators, with prime examples including Alibaba or SAP. There are a number of infrastructure models that describe the different ecosystems from varying perspectives. For example, Niawali and Fogel developed a model of 5 areas that support entrepreneurship and the creation of new firms, including government policies and procedures, socioeconomic conditions, entrepreneurial and business skills, all of which lead to increased entrepreneurship. These are complemented by financial support to businesses and non-financial support to businesses, which lead to an increased new firm creation. A second model identifies 6 structures necessary for new ventures: universities and research institutes, venture capital, talent pool, lead users, entrepreneurial spirit, and services infrastructure. A third model breaks knowledge infrastructure into 3 components: economic dynamics, internal knowledge production, and governance of interactions. A fourth model proposes that innovation ecosystems are composed of 3 interacting sub-ecosystems: science, technology, and business. Finally, the most comprehensive model created to date describes infrastructure as a social system. The 4 primary components of infrastructure, called industry infrastructure elements, include proprietary functions, resource endowments, institutional arrangements, and market consumption. I'll provide some more detail about these primary industry infrastructure elements next. Under the infrastructure element of institutional arrangements are the resources and capabilities of organizational legitimation, regulation, and the creation of standards, both internally and in relation to the rest of the ecosystem. Institutional arrangements help reduce the inherent liabilities of newness of emerging industries and nascent markets. The second infrastructure element, resource endowments, develops critical scientific and technological knowledge required for product creation, creates and provides the necessary financial networks and resources, and it develops and refreshes the human competency pool the emerging industry requires. The third infrastructure element, proprietary functions, include all the activities required to commercialize the technology into products and services for the market. These activities include, first, the product research, design, manufacture, assembly, test, and production. Second, all the business functions such as marketing, administration, etc. And third, the development of the upstream suppliers and downstream distributors of their product, also referred to as the innovation network. Finally, the market consumption infrastructure elements includes the functions essential to a market economy, such as customer demand, competition, market creation, and cultural norms. So, After identifying all the necessary resources and capabilities for new industry emergence in the form of the 4 industry infrastructure elements, the chapter offers 5 propositions as the basis of a process model of infrastructure emergence and change. The first proposition asserts that infrastructure emergence and change begins with a catalyzing event, a spark. In my line of work, the commercial space industry, the infrastructure for the emerging suborbital tourism industry was sparked by the announcement and ultimate winning of the Ansari X Prize. The second proposition says that we know each industry infrastructure element is important and necessary for the long-term viability of an emerging ecosystem, but we don't know how much of each is sufficient, or if an overabundance of one can compensate for the lack of any other that might be needing additional resources. The third proposition says that all infrastructure elements must interact to overcome the barriers of industry emergence. The fourth proposition asserts that infrastructure emergence is a cumulative achievement, including many events and actors over a long period of time in all infrastructure element categories. From the previous example of suborbital space tourism, the history of industry infrastructure element construction spans over 70 years. Finally, the fifth proposition states that the supportive role that industry infrastructure element creation provides can become boundaries ultimately and limitations that the emerging industry will have to overcome as the infrastructure elements become barriers and bottlenecks to industry growth. Finally, the chapter concludes with a list of recommendations for further research. First, the author notes the lack of common definitions or terms and accepted theory, partly because of the many different disciplines interested in the phenomenon of industry infrastructure creation, but also sometimes within a single discipline. And this causes confusion and hinders theoretical understanding and development. Second, because the systems being studied are complex and complicated, the amount of data required is super extensive and data collection is difficult. And because data collection is so difficult, there are a lot of studies of single industries, but multi-industry contexts are very rare. Also, the studies to date tend to focus on technology-rich industries, so the study of other industries that are not based on new technologies are also rare. Another area of further research would be the inclusion of culture in the ecosystem infrastructure studies. This aspect is clearly very important, but it is under-theorized and not well operationalized to date. Another limitation is that the studies to date tend to focus on geographically constrained areas, whereas more globalized studies, although they would increase the complexity of the industry ecosystem, could open interesting avenues of theorizing if better explored. Finally, understanding the infrastructure changes over time is also a potential avenue of further research. Well, that's it for chapter 24. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. This is one of my favorite chapters, but if nothing else, please hit subscribe or hit the notification bell below so you'll be aware of any new videos that come out in the future. Bye. OT in Space was produced by IRL, which stands for Impossible Research LLC. IRL conducts process research on the topics of innovation and industry emergence within the space sector context. IRL also offers services of organization theory consulting, research consulting, and STEAM outreach. This video is intended for educational purposes only.